Hi, Tom Miller, and I'm with Williamson County Sheriff Jeff Diederich. We were recently on the phone and about some of the drug houses, and the sheriff came up with an idea. We do some interviews to let you know about more about what's going on in Southern Illinois, drug houses and closings and more. And Jeff, I really do appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk about some of the good things that the Williamson County Sheriff's Office is doing, and hopefully we can share some information and answer a lot of questions and keep people informed.
On my radio show, I've asked you more than once, and it's been more of a personal curiosity than anything, but I know I'm not alone. You've got a lucrative business career. I mean, I knew you first in insurance because I've known you for over 30 years. And then, the restaurant, and you've had all these other things. And then Williamson County, but you've been doing law enforcement in the background for a long time in preparation for this. But I think, and myself included, when you've got such a lucrative business prospect for you personally, why put yourself in a position where people shoot at you?
Well, that's a tough question and has a lot of different variations to the answer. But the short of it is I believe in my community. And I believe in the community from the standpoint that we should have law and order. We should have a safe place to raise kids, to live, to go to work every day without the threat of criminal activity that's around us. And, as we've seen over the past, decades, but for my tenure as sheriff in the past 3+ years, what we have seen is that largely our criminal activity is driven and interacts largely with drug activity, whether it be ancillary crime of theft or crimes against persons. And addiction is a terrible thing. And there are many different ways to approach that beyond just the traditional law enforcement, such as treatment and programs and such. And all of those types of things work in culmination and have to come together to collaborate to find the solution. But to answer your question, why, is I believe in my community. I have had a prosperous career that's been oriented and based here. I've raised my family here.
And that's where I want to jump in, because you talk about families, but see, here's the thing. You live here. These are, when you talk about families and protecting them, you're talking about your families too. You're more motivated by this, I think, because of your own children, your own family, your own contacts and people that you work with every day and what they experience.
Well, and we've talked about this. I am dedicated 17 hours a day, 7 days a week to this job. And I have to tell you that there's more work than I can get done in that amount of time. So that tells you that there's criminal activity out there. And if we turn a blind eye to that activity, that doesn't mean that the activity doesn't exist or it's gone away. So we are focused every day on tackling that criminal element to make sure that the good people of this county have a place to live, work, and raise their kids without the threat or the veil of that criminal activity.
I talk to people, and they talk to me about this every day. I don't think that 30 years ago that we had crime come up in a daily friendly conversation among our peers every day. Well, guess who was in my neighborhood last night? Somebody pilfered my lawnmower, my kid's bicycle. It's kind of everywhere. And then I'm talking about the small stuff. You've got the big stuff too.
Well, Tom, keep in mind we're in a much more visual world, whether it be Ring camera, social media. So information travels, as you know, at a much faster pace. So I think that plays into it largely. But I also think there's a transition in our culture where there's less supervision for children because of the demands placed on families to work. Both parents are working. It's just different. And that doesn't mean that it's different in a bad way. It means it's different, and we have to be aware of certain things. And when things aren't going right, there has to be steps in place that take care of that. 97% of our community are law-abiding citizens. So when we talk about criminal activity, we got to be really careful. We don't want to make it sound like our community's a bad place to live or that things are unraveling and falling apart. What we're talking about is 97% of criminal activity committed by 3% of the population. It's a very small minority of people that are disrupting the flow of the day-to-day lives of the people that live in this county.
Carbondale City Manager, former Chief of Police Stan Reno, calls drugs the nexus of crime. And when you take that and what you just said over the last couple of moments and apply this to the practical world and how you've applied it, the focus has been shutting down drug houses.
Well, it has, but that's just the most visual. That's what people see. Every day, our law enforcement, our deputies, our law enforcement partners, we're out on the street conducting normal, routine police services. And whether that be somebody that's broken down on the side of the road, somebody that's having a really bad day, they're just good people that are experiencing a difficult day that need assistance. And so it's easy to overshadow that with specialty units that are very visual in the sense that they're providing the headlines in the media, closing down drug houses, recovering stolen items. And those are the things that catch a lot of attention. But sometimes you got to step back and think about what we do every day is equally as important.
Yeah. And Williamson County has more highway miles in the county than any other county in Southern Illinois.
Well, take that a step farther, as we've discussed in the past with our ATV program, in addition to all of that mileage, we have even more that are unpaved, uncharted, and power line easements, railroad easements.
What were once hunting trails are now escape routes.
Well, they are, and they're staging areas for criminal activity. We go out, we go down a railroad easement, and then from that railroad easement, we take things that don't belong to us, put them along railroad tracks, and then we come back a few hours later and pick them up.
Wow.
We recover a lot of stolen four-wheelers that way, where people have stolen them from farms and things and other equipment. It's just, you have to think out of the box, and it's a different way of policing that we've really never tackled before. So because of these efforts, because of the different approaches that we're taking, you're seeing a much more visual approach to apprehending criminals and recovering property and interdicting drug houses.
I was looking up some numbers before I met you here today, which, by the way, we're at the Williamson County Airport.
We are.
Veterans Airport. If I don't say Veterans Airport, Doug will have my hide.
Well, that's a great facility. They've really done a good job out here.
You're telling this is the first time I've seen the place since the newest renovations.
Well, they've done a great job out here.
This is really nice. This is really a nice place. I'm impressed. I think that's great. It's interesting because the intersection that I can see through these windows is the single biggest intersection, busiest intersection in Southern Illinois. And so I was looking up these numbers I was just referencing, and I found a National Institute of Car Theft Insurance Bureau or something like that. And they said, well, we don't have the latest figures on car thefts, but in the first half of 2025, over 13,000 cars were stolen in this country. So I looked up the Illinois State Police records and just took a couple of numbers because car theft, we would have thought in Southern Illinois we'd have to worry about this, but we do now, and it's a problem. And when it comes to car theft, I looked over July to September, 280 stolen and hijacked cars, 280, 21 stolen, recovered, 11 hijacked. Out of 281, you've had to deal with this too, and I have the sneaking suspicion your recovery rate is higher.
Our recovery rate, without compiling numbers off the top of my head, I would say is around 80 to 90%. And I think it's
that's due to, we should report that. Right?
Well, absolutely.
If you know 90, that's 180 just off the top of my head of here where they have 32.
Tom, largely, this is a product of a couple different aspects. A large percentage of them are crimes of opportunity. People have left keys in vehicles and so forth. But we also have a juvenile problem. And we've been working towards that problem for quite some time. One of our communities, we were reaching a point where we were having stolen vehicles by juveniles several times a week.
Yes. And I saw one that you had a recent arrest. They'd stolen 2 cars in one day.
Absolutely. And, there's no ramifications in the minds of juveniles in the state of Illinois currently. But here's the interesting part. You talk about reporting the theft of the stolen vehicles, and you would think, well, obviously that's very important in order to know to go recover them. But because we're dealing with the same people, again, 97% of criminal activity by 3% of the population, Tom, we're recovering vehicles that are stolen that haven't yet been reported stolen. That happens on a routine basis. We know they're stolen. We'll have the vehicle stopped. We'll have a juvenile in custody or detained, at 3 o'clock in the morning. We know what's going on, hasn't been discovered by the victim yet. We'll send an officer by that residence, knock on the door, and they'll say, no, my vehicle's right. Well, wait a minute, it was there.
Yes.
And it's gone. And
Okay.
We've already recovered it.
All right. I'm personally curious about this. What effect has the Safety Act had on stolen cars and the prevalence of stolen cars and the recidivism where you go back and do it again? I sense there's something connecting these two.
Well, and I don't think you can just isolate it to what the topic you're describing. I think it's across the board largely.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of the safety.
One
act.
symptom, right?
I can't be. I'm in law enforcement. My job is to apprehend criminals and make sure criminal activity doesn't reoccur over and over and over. But here's what I'll tell you. I can sit around and I can complain. I can whine about the rules that are in place, the law of the land that's been put in place, or I can find workarounds and I can find ways to accomplish the tasks that we need to. The Williamson County Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with the Williamson County State's Attorney, Ted Hampson, has found ways to do that. We are holding criminals accountable. And I'm not suggesting that the Safety Act is a great thing.
This is the prevalence of grand juries now?
Well, the grand juries have helped, but having a tough on crime state's attorney, having a tough on crime law enforcement component, working in tangent, you find ways to get that done. You make sure that every case is taken to trial, or if you need to, you charge everything that needs to be charged. And that doesn't mean every crime gets charged. There are circumstances where you have a first-time offender juvenile who has done silly stuff that juveniles might do. And that individual may not be predispositioned to continue to do criminal activity. He needs to be returned to his parents and let parents do what parents do. So I don't want to just blanket the idea that we go around charging everyone. But when you have somebody that repetitiously, over and over and over, steals cars, runs around at 2 o'clock in the morning, worse yet, how about driving by and shooting up houses?
Driving 80 miles an hour through a stop sign at a busy intersection.
Hey, let's not forget that these
high speed fleeing to elude.
Same individuals have led up to homicides, okay? And, we've seen this over and over. And if you don't take care of it at a lower level, so for example, the individuals who are committing repetitious crime, you might say, well, they're out, with a curfew violation. Not a big deal, right? Yeah, but if you address the curfew violation on the 10th time, the 11th time, and the 12th time, you're taking that child out of the atmosphere of being able to commit higher level crime. Ultimately, you're changing the scope of that environment, and you're doing a service to the community and to that child to prevent further crime.
I hope this doesn't sound bad, Jeff. It's mine, because I've known you for a long time. But one of the things that I'm most moved and stunned by you is the compassion you have for the people that you come into contact with. See, I'm kind of a black and white person. Bad, good. And we don't live in that world. I know
Sure.
You don't. But I've often been stunned listening to you because I know you well enough to catch your voice and your inflection and the compassion you have for somebody who's got on the wrong trail, and let's see if we can get them back on the trail. People did that for me when I was young. I'm glad to see that somebody's doing that for somebody today, because I know for a fact that if we don't intercede on some of these, I know how they end up dead. Just like, that's how I've had friends that came to that mortal conclusion. And I've had others that have been redirected. Some even went into corrections and law enforcement, but there was something that happened and they moved off, right? And they went in another direction. I've constantly been surprised by, just in casual conversations, your compassion for the people.
Well, we can't lock everybody up. There are times where that's appropriate.
And see, kind of the impulse is now when you read all this and the speed news, you were talking about how fast that happens, we said, lock them up.
And there are many times where that is appropriate. But there's also times where we need to change patterns of behavior, where we have to provide guidance, where we need to get people to the right individuals who can be mentors and change the direction of somebody's life. And there's nothing more appropriate to use that for than our youth. But sometimes you do reach a point when we've gone through a process of curfew violations to shooting up houses to drug use over and over, stealing, dozens of cars. And then we reached the point of that individual committing a homicide, for example. We've reached a point of no return. And
so should I say juvenile detention center here?
Well, we've had that conversation before, and that is definitely something that we need. And it's not popular to talk about locking kids.
I don't want to lock up kids. I know you don't.
But if we don't do it in the right way, they don't get the services that they need. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, if a juvenile does a drive-by shooting on a house, and Tom, that sounds far-fetched.
I want to intercede here. Harrisburg Youth Center, I've got friends of mine who are corrections officers there. And I talked to him about this, the very same thing we're talking about, kids. And I said, man, I don't want to lock up kids. And he looks at me and he says, trust me, they ain't kids.
No, they're not the kids we know.
Yes, in age-wise. And he says, these guys, the people I'm dealing with, they're not children. Don't be misled by that.
Well, And that's true. This is far different. If you remember, go back about 2 or 3 years ago on Christmas Eve, I believe it was Christmas Eve, we had a car full of juveniles shoot up 3 different houses in 3 different towns.
Remember it?
And, when you have those individuals in custody at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't return them to mom with the idea that they're going to go right back out on the street. There's a breakdown in supervision that's allowed this to happen. You can't return them to the same environment. At a minimum, they need to be before a judge the next morning, and somebody needs to figure out the disposition of how we're going to move forward. And in order to do that effectively, you have to have a facility to hold them. And Southern Illinois does not have that facility.
And we're required to have that by law.
We should. We absolutely should. And eventually, we're going to have bad outcomes that dictate that we need to be able to hold an individual or individuals for a period of time. Right now, the Williamson County Sheriff's Office has a phenomenal option based on what is out there that exists currently. And that's we drive to Mississippi County, Missouri. That's an hour away.
And you see, I started opening the books and thinking, he's got to go both ways. Maybe 2 officers, car units gone on the road. Then if we've got to bring him back, and
it's not effective for law enforcement, but it's also not fair to the juvenile
and the family.
And the family.
Right, which is that you talked about. All right, now, this is one of the most talked about subjects. You came out and talked about it. The Williamson County Commissioners talked about it. Your opponents in the upcoming March election have talked about it. Aggressive law enforcement in Williamson County and insurance rates.
Sure.
Now, I don't believe that risk management and aggressive law enforcement are mutually exclusive items. And I'm of the mind you aren't either.
Well, I agree with that. It's a tough subject because we're looking at it. We're looking at the subject of insurance as if it's an option. And I think what you have to remember is that the insurance markets, Tom, I've been in the insurance business for over 30 years. I understand.
The irony of this is probably not lost on you.
And, what I understand about the insurance markets is they're cyclical in nature. And that means that rates go up, rates come down, but then the average median is always going up. And it's completely driven on frequency and severity of claims. Frequency being how often we have one, the severity of being the upper level of what those payouts are in damages and costs to defend. So what I understand from that is this: it's hard to bring those 2 components together. We knew that by being aggressive, there's more exposure to the county. But what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to let somebody commit criminal activity and let them just drive away? At what point is it fair that you're stopping individuals for low-level crime and issuing them, say, tickets, but you're letting major offenders drive free because it's too much exposure? You can't do that. So here's what we're not doing. We're not looking at this as a big picture. And it's political season, obviously.
Right.
Individuals are going to take advantage of the opportunity to pick at the hot spots. But when you look at it in totality, what you have to remember is our premiums didn't go up. I've seen comments where, hey, they've gone up,
900% was what I saw by quote.
They did not go up 900%. They've implemented a deductible that only applies to the law enforcement liability portion of the coverage. And let's be honest, most claims never even get to that point. Most claims are settled for a small amount or never reached the full deductible.
I read this in the insurance industry newsletters that were published on this, and they were talking about this. Well, we don't know because it could be $5,000, it could be $10,000, right? And I'm thinking, well, that's small money, right? It was interesting when I talked to people in preparation for this interview. Here's what they asked me. Well, it cost me more on my property tax.
Well, it's not, no. And you have to remember something that 60-70% of the property taxes that we pay in this county are going to our school district. Okay, we're educating our children.
What percentage is going to sheriff?
Oh, it's a very, very small percentage of what remains.
Single digit.
It's single digit, yeah. And so there's not going to be a lot of fluctuation. But here's the big picture that you got to remember: that the premiums are being driven by 2 things. One, a distressed marketplace where we had 30 companies a couple of years ago offering law enforcement liability coverage. We're down now to 10 or less around the country. So you have a shrinking in the marketplace because, what's driving that? I'll tell you what's driving it. is body cams, the accessibility of being able to have cell phones, people are reporting. So everything is under the microscope. It triggers more litigious environments for law enforcement.
I just saw somebody in this morning before I came in. They were suing the police department because they had to remove a piece of religious apparel, and they were suing the law enforcement, I think, for $250 million.
Sure. But here's the reality, Tom.
That was just a search.
You have to look at the totality of circumstances, and what everybody is not looking at currently that I think has to be made clear is the sheriff's office has done a phenomenal job in increasing revenues through housing federal inmates, for example.
That is something I'm really curious about. Sure. Why do we house them in Williams County?
Well, because it's a great facility. We've invested in,
yes,
built this facility. We need to get the return.
Why aren't they down at Marion?
Well, the individuals that we're housing on the federal side are pending trial or have short tenures. And so,
gotcha.
We're at 100 plus inmates that we're housing on the federal side. This generates, in the next 12 months, will generate around $3.2 million.
All right. So, now one of the Williams County sheriffs, one of the Williamson County commissioners, Jim Marlowe, said that this is resulting from high-speed pursuits and excessive force in the jail.
Tom, unfortunately, Mr. Marlowe's never been in a patrol car. He wouldn't have a clue. Not a clue. So, that's easy for him to say. That's politically motivated. The reality of it is we're going to generate $3.2 million in housing federal inmates. We're going to generate over $250,000 in our municipal policing program. Those revenues dramatically offset any kind of exposure we have. And the exposure that we have, when we talk about a $500,000 deductible, 99% of those are never going to get to the $500,000.
Is that $500,000 for each case?
Well, it depends. If it's one incident, then it would be one deductible, regardless of the number of people involved. But if it's multiple incidents, but here's the reality. When we talk about pursuits and things like that, we've made it clear, you run from law enforcement in Williamson County, we are not going to just turn a blind eye. And as a result, the number of pursuits we have are minuscule.
Are they dropping off?
They're significant.
Compared to the way you were first year?
Absolutely. The message is loud and clear. So the ironic part is,
that message works.
It does.
I'm gonna tell you, actually, you can almost see it. I met with some area gang members over at that barbecue restaurant right
Sure.
there.
Sure.
They know it. I asked. And they're afraid of the state's attorney in particular, I noticed. But they also told me that breaking the drug houses up, well, we'll just move.
Sure.
So what they do, find somebody that could use a month's rent money, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, and say, here's 3 months rent, can we use your house? And then, when you get to know who they are, they rotate those boys out and they bring in new ones. You do all this.
Well, I do, and here's how I know this. Tom, when we're doing drug operations, my narcotics agents are doing overhears, court-authorized overhears, where we're buying narcotics and we can listen and we can watch video and audio while these are going on. And you would be shocked as to the comments from these individuals that I hear. Comments like, well, that sheriff's not going to keep me out of this county, but yet they won't come from Jackson County over to do the deal. They won't come from Franklin County. They want you to go up to their county, and we're not going to do that. So it's simple. Commit criminal activity in this county, you're going to be held accountable. Don't like it, don't come to this county. It's simple.
It's a lesson that I learned at a young age.
We're just
you don't want to go over there. We don't want to do that because Chuck Garnotti's not going to let you off.
Exactly. And
that reputation works. That's policing in another level that I don't think I appreciate.
Yeah, tough on crime.
A reputation from the minute you cross the line.
Sure.
That you're in Williamson County now.
Here's the thing, Tom. If I can just wrap around the insurance issue, is the message shouldn't be, oh my goodness, the sheriff has caused this. The sheriff hasn't caused anything.
Your opponents.
Activity.
Your opponents say he needs to take responsibility for this.
Responsibility for what? Catching criminals? That's absurd. What that tells me is those same opponents, if they're either have expectations that if they were in my position, that they're going to do the opposite and not be tough on crime, which scares me to death, or two, it's just political lip service and they're going to do the exact same thing that I'm doing.
I don't think we should, I've believed this on both phases of my life when I was more of a criminal than anything. You don't want to compromise. You can't. going forward. Once you've given up that property, you got to fight for it a second or third time. And, keeping people redirected, making sure they know we're out here, we're not going to let you go. We catch you.
And we've invested a lot of time, energy, and money to get to where we are today, where we hold criminal activity accountable, that the citizens of this county know that. I hear it every day. Thank you. I respond the same way. I appreciate your support. And we have a lot of fine men and women at the Williamson County Sheriff's Office and our law enforcement partners around this county working hard every day to make this happen.
So insurance is not going to make, the insurance and activities of the Williamson County Sheriff Department are not going to make my property taxes go up.
Absolutely not. And here's why, Tom. Let me wrap completely around it.
Right.
The message should not be that the sheriff has driven up pricing on insurance 900%, because that's not true. The deductible went up, number one. Number two, what the message should be is the sheriff has created a net positive of over $2 million, because you can't say we're paying too much for copy paper and leave out the part about increasing revenue. You have to look at the totality of it. We're being tough on crime. We have more cops on the street. We're being more aggressive in fighting that crime. There's going to be a higher exposure. And simultaneously, we have done a good job on the business side of what we do by generating federal dollars to offset that exposure. We're net positive, Tom. Not only that, when I look at the number of incidents, okay, not the number of plaintiffs, because if we have one car that gets in a car crash with one of our vehicles and 7 people sue, we can't control how many people are in the car. But when we look at the number of incidents and we look at that annually over the last 10, 15 years.
Your highest number was 5.
Tom, we're 20,
in 1 year.
On an average, over the last 4 years, on average, we're 25% lower in our frequency of incidents than any of my predecessors going back multiple sheriffs. So this is just good commentary during political season, and it does nothing to further the efforts of the good men and women of the Williamson County Sheriff's Office in fighting crime.
So what are you going to do next, Jeff?
We're going to keep doing what we're doing, Tom. We're going to keep going after criminal activity. And that's, if you look at social media, one thing you can never get away from is the pushback that we get in the public sphere from the people that we're targeting. The people we're targeting, their sphere of influence in the community, whatever group that might be, if you look at it and you dissect it, those are the people. Tom, I'm proud of that. The good citizens of this county come to me every day. They come to my deputies. We interact with them.
Their prevalence on social media can't be ignored either.
No, and they are strong there. But even further than that, when you look at the individuals who are attacking law enforcement, and that's what it is, they are attacking the very efforts of what we're doing. We're not going to be dissuaded by that. We're going to just continue to push harder. Don't commit criminal activity in this county, and you got nothing to worry about.
Because there's a bunch of stuff. Now, Jeff has offered to do more of these interviews, and I'm going to take him up on that, but really would like to hear from you. We'll set up an email address where you can ask questions and do more, because there's stuff I want to talk about. Crab Orchard Wildlife Refuge, the boat you've got out there, the incident on 37.
Yes.
I can create a list.
And I think these are great topics.
And I'm literally looking, because I want to spend more time on guns. Fentanyl, which has me terrified. I talked to predecessors there, Stan Reno, Marion, yes. And it was just, 5 years ago, there was no fentanyl. That's not the case anymore. 57 presents its own issues for you alone. So I'm really glad that we've got an opportunity to do more. People want to hear them. I hope they do. Before I want to go, there's the most forgotten subject. And of all the things that we've talked about today, and people need to be talking about, and they keep forgotten every day, and it ticks me off to no end, and that's the victim. The Safety Act, which I hope we can do an entire interview section, and we talked about it briefly. The Safety Act ignores victims. And a lot of times, I think the media ignores the victims too. We talk about the person who perpetrated the crime, but there's a wake of damage behind meth, behind car theft. 13,000 cars stolen in the United States first half of 2025. In rural southern Illinois, your car gets you to work, you get your kids to school, it gets you to the hospital, it gets you to your food, you got to have a car. You steal somebody's car, and they don't have the spare out back. It's not the people we live with. It's not our homes. I don't have one spare. The victim. What more do we need to do for the victims in crime? Because prosecution itself is one thing, and quite frankly, they expect it. The word justice has been mutated. What do you think about victims and where they are in Williamson County?
Now, keep in mind, prosecution is being done quite well in Williamson County now, but what we can't change is the long timeline that it takes to do that, because every individual gets due process, and that takes time. So restitution takes time, things like that. What we can do as law enforcement is we make sure that we recover these vehicles quick. We make sure that when individuals have crime that's taken and we recover that, we can get it back to the victim
Quickly.
These are small but very important things. And as you said, if I lose my car and that's the only car I have, and it's my gateway to be able to get to my livelihood every day that supports my family, it's a problem.
Well, not far from here, they stripped the power lines off the poles.
They did.
The victims are everybody who's on a cold winter night and they'd have no electricity.
Well, and the long-term effect is somebody's paying for that.
Yes, the
It's
customer.
not going to be the power company. It's going to be, it's that extra half a cent on every kilowatt that pays for that, or whatever it might be over time. And, it's just, it takes a lot of time to interdict that type of crime. And I think, when we talk about drug houses, that's a good one, but that's a great example too. All of those, I was extremely involved in the drug houses. We did 4 this past week.
Which is it comes back to why you do this job. I mean, I can work in the office and and when I'm done, go home and pet my dog and see my kids and sit by my fireplace, or I can bust down the door at a meth house.
Well, and even when you're talking about the role of sheriffs, there's no crime coming to the sheriff's office. It's out on the street. So there are things that I have to do in the office, but I try to minimize that because I want to be frontline. I want to be with the men and women that are out there doing it. Because I've said from the very beginning of my tenure and even before, it's not fair to those doing the job to have policymakers who have no clue what's going on. I understand when I implement a policy, how it affects the troops out on the street because I'm out there with them. And if it doesn't make sense, we modify those policies. I think that we've done a pretty good job of stripping the red tape the best we can, but still keeping structure and the appropriate oversight into things that we do. But in those cases, the drug houses, those cases of stealing the copper, that's not, we were driving down the road and in 5 minutes we solved those crimes. Months of activity from investigators using tools like camera systems, GPS tracking.
So you get the information to the state's attorney Hampton, and he gets a conviction, and you stop the recidivism.
Our goal is not to apprehend. Our goal is to catch the individuals with enough evidence and to package it properly to get it to the state's attorney that they're able to hold those individuals accountable and be successful in the prosecution.
Which is what the taxpayer and the victim of that crime expect of you.
I would no other way to do the job than to do it properly. You can run around and real quickly make a good splash. I caught so-and-so doing this. But if you don't do the back end work or the front end work, the individual's not going to end up being held accountable in a court of law. It takes a lot of time to do that.
How many men and women working with you in the sheriff's department?
Well, we have 139 total employees, including the jail, administrative staff, communications, the jail, courthouse security, investigators, deputies, et cetera, et cetera. I work beside them all. And at every moment, almost every day, I'm interacting with, every area of our office. And it takes that whole team to bring it together. We have a total of 40 deputies on the road. That does include our investigators.
I was told, or did I read it somewhere, that you did kind of the math for county highways and say, look, we need more cops.
Before I ever took office, Tom, I spent a lot of money, and I hired an individual that specialized in doing analysis of law enforcement agencies, not just in the United States, but around the world, and provided him with the data from calls for service, the geography of Williamson County, and all of the demographics that were required in order to do the analysis. And at the time, we were funded and staffed at 34% of what we should have been staffed. I'm pleased to tell you, the one compliment that I can always give to the county board is they've been largely supportive of the law enforcement effort that I've driven. They funded that. And we're very blessed in Williamson County to have a phenomenal economic base. When we talk about property taxes and that, you got to understand those taxes were largely driven by state mandates that require certain percentages and things.
Funding levels.
Funding level. They don't have anything to do with what the sheriff's office is spending or anything like that. And so they have obligations to meet those standards that are set by the state. But we are in a position, and I'm blessed in this county, to have a very vibrant and economic base here that for the foreseeable future looks like it's going to continue to be very positive. We have great jobs, great education. This is the place in Southern Illinois to live and work, is Williamson County.
Yeah, it is becoming the capital of Southern Illinois. Mayor Absher talks about, he says, with what you have to deal with, he says, look at it as 4 interstates come through our county. I'm like, 4? He says, yeah, 13 counts. He says 24 and 57 merge and come into Williamson County. He says, we have a lot of traffic come through here, and to use that as an opportunity too, but maybe that's a subject for another day.
Well, as you know, we've got 70,000 people in the county, but this county surges day and night to 120 plus thousand.
Right.
Jobs, hotels, restaurants, shopping.
You think about that. People from other counties count on you, Saline County, and how many thousands of people come across 13 working there every day. Something happens to them, they look to you for the answers.
Yes.
But I tell you what, I kept you a long time, and I really want to apologize, but I really enjoy every single minute of it.
Thank you. I
Thanks,
always
Jeff.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
And we're going to do some more of these. Jeff's offered to do it. And here's one of the things I want you to know if you've been watching these segments that we've been presenting online. Before this interview, he never said, we can't talk about this, don't ask about that. Not one issue, right? So if you've got an issue you'd like to bring to us, we're going to get you an email address. Hopefully you'll reach out. But I want to make that very clear. At no point did Jeff say, I don't want to talk about insurance or 37 or whatever our drug houses. There was nothing like that. Thanks again.